I believe that the problem with most ADHD women is they're trying to fit in, and we will never fit in because ultimately we were meant to stand out. We were actually meant to lead in our area of interest.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about using storytelling as a tool to help you reclaim your story and build your most beautiful future. And today I'm so excited to share the story of an amazing woman who has done just that, Tracy Otsuka. Tracy is not only a lawyer and an entrepreneur, but then she has embraced a pivot in her life that has also led her to being an ADHD coach. And she is also the author of a book, ADHD for Smartass Women, as well as podcast host of the amazing and informative podcast that really makes you feel like you just got a beautiful hug when you're done listening to it, which is also titled ADHD for Smartass Women. And I am so excited to have you on the show, Tracy. Let's hit it because we have so much to talk about today.
I bet we do, and I am delighted to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I am just so pleased. So I have to tell the story, and I've never told you this story of how I first learned about you. So I was driving down the road on a long drive. I think I'm a publisher and I had dropped off some books somewhere. And so I was driving home from that and I was listening to a podcast where you happened to be the guest. And I literally had to pull over at the side of the road and send you and your team an email because I was just so excited about what you're doing and the mission you have and your graciousness and vulnerability with sharing your story and bringing other people into the fold with you. I had to have you on Talks with Dr. Shafer. And I'm just so thrilled that you're here.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you identify with ADHD? Because I am looking at all the things you've done, and then you just dropped another one. I'm a publisher, and I'm like, WTF? Like, you've done so much. And so as I was preparing, I'm thinking, I wonder if she's one of us.
You know, I am not diagnosed with ADHD. But, it's interesting because when I speak to therapists about ADHD and autism, right, and neurodivergence in general, and we talk about late diagnoses of this neurodivergent world that we're living in, there's some question as to, do you go for the diagnosis? Do you not? And I think it'll be interesting to have your thoughts on that too, with the community you interact with. So I'm not diagnosed, but I certainly identify with so many things that you discuss. Oh, so many things. And the curiosity and the need for pivot, the true need for pivot, and kind of not understanding why you wouldn't, right? Not being able to stay within the confines that society has for people who don't have those traits. So I do absolutely identify. And you yourself, you were diagnosed later in life with ADHD. Tell me how that came about for you.
I was ultimately diagnosed because my son was diagnosed. He was diagnosed at 12. And I literally almost fell off my chair because I thought ADHD meant, number one, you're not very smart, you're all over the place, and you are destined for not so much success. I didn't know what it was. If she had come back and said it was autism, he was on the spectrum, I could have seen that because when he was really into something, he was so into it. But I did not see ADHD because I didn't understand that, hyperfocus was also a characteristic of ADHD. And so we went to a psychologist in our area who was supposedly an expert in ADHD. And she met with us 3 times, once just my son, once our entire family, and then once my husband and I. And she sat us down that 3rd meeting and said, your job as his parents, thankfully my son wasn't there. Your job as his parents is to reduce his expectations so he won't be disappointed in life. And I remember thinking, who the hell would tell any child that? I don't care if you have a child who has an intellectual disability. I'm sorry. if you aim down here, you're going to get down here. You aim up here, maybe you won't get that high. This is a podcast, and I'm making hand movements, but
It's
you'll
okay.
just be, maybe you'll be a little below where you aimed, and maybe you'll even be above it. It just made no sense to me. So needless to say, we never went back.
Mm.
But what I did was I was then committed to figure out what this means, because I was so appalled that here was this psychologist who became highly recommended by people we really trusted, bright people. And I thought, she is not only giving this information to us, but, she was probably in her late 60s. How many other families has she given this information to? So I wanted
Mm.
to get to the bottom of it. But it took me 8 months of research and studying up about my son to finally figure out that, oh crap, he got it from me. Because ADHD can look so very different in women.
Mm.
So 8 months later, I was diagnosed. And let me tell you, the two things, we've already touched on one of them, the two things that really clinched the deal for me was, number one, drivenness is a form of hyperactivity. And I am nothing if not driven. And I
Mm.
kind of, I did well in school, but I had to always study harder than everybody else. And so because of that, I just felt like, I must just not be as smart.
Mm.
So drivenness is a form of hyperactivity. And my son was like that too. So I remember at 9 years old, we would find him Sunday mornings. I know this is not good parenting. He'd be on the computer and he'd be researching, how do I get into Harvard? How do I, what is the black hole? Like, he was so curious. And so I saw that same drivenness in him, but just because he was so much younger, it looked different than my drivenness, which was always about building businesses and trying new things and starting over and learning. And, when I was in, I was all the way in. The second thing was my interpersonal intuition, which I believe, and researchers also believe, is part of ADHD, or can be part of ADHD as well. Now, ADHD comes with what they call a lot of comorbidities, which I really hate that word. So let's call it
Mm.
co-occurring conditions.
I love that.
And
Yeah.
one of them can be autism. In fact, I believe the statistic is that 60% of those diagnosed with autism also qualify for an ADHD diagnosis. And
Right.
so, in those cases, probably the interpersonal intuition may not be as strong, because, people with autism struggle with understanding social rules and, like all the, why are we even doing what we're doing?
Mm.
Um, when it comes to ADHD, though, if you think about it, if you can't 100% trust your brain, what do you start doing? You start building your intuition, right?
Mm.
Because the brain doesn't always make sense. It's like, well, why did it work out this time, but it didn't work out that time? So the long and short of it was those two things that really clinched the deal for me. And then, I don't know, I had read this how many times, that ADHD is about as genetic as height, but I
Right.
still didn't quite get it. I was looking at my husband and saying, well, did he get it from him? And then when I figured it out, I looked at my family and I was like, oh my gosh, it is all
Mm.
over our family. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so that's my story.
Yeah. Well, and I want to, kind of piggyback off of that, and how, here this psychologist has said, you need to lower your expectations. And yet, okay, this is my son, and he's having behaviors, and I see myself in them. I see my family in them. I am a high achieving person, right? I can reach the stars if I choose to, if I'm interested in doing so. I can do anything. And I think also I'd be curious to know, when you sit back and have, introspection and review of the people that you just think are the most amazing humans that have ever graced this planet, and you think about their behaviors and the things they accomplished and what we know about them, are those also people who are also neurodivergent?
I think so. I joke all the
Mm.
time that I'm sure the person who invented the wheel had to have ADHD, right? Like, who would think, okay, I'm going to take a stone piece of thing, a stone, and I'm going to round it all out, and then I'm going to make it spin, and there's going to be four of them, like the whole thing. Um, I think it's our curiosity.
Mm.
And we have all these thoughts. So it's ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But the truth of the matter is, we don't have a deficit of attention. We have the opposite. We have a surplus of attention, right? So we're noticing everything all at the same time, which can also be a problem because it's all these thoughts. And that's why we're over here and over there
Mm.
and a little bit over there.
Right.
But if you think about it, it's also those thoughts that account for our creativity. And so creativity just doesn't, it's not just creativity in dance and art and music and fashion and whatever else. It's also creativity of thought. It's about creating widgets and building businesses and also putting novel concepts together that have never been put together and creating something brand new. So
Mm.
it's the constant movement, whether it's movement in our brain or movement in our body. We have to be moving forward. We are not happy if we're not in our creative. And many of us have learned, especially those that I would say, let's talk about women because that's who I work with, successful women with ADHD. It's not enough to there's no complacency. We can't just be oh, well, I'm successful. No, it's like, what else can I do? What else can I build? And so we can often look like we're all over the place because we dabble a little here and there and down here. But and I know you talk about purpose a lot, if we know that sweet spot where our values, our strengths, talents, skills, passions, and purpose are, and we're constantly working in that area, everything we've done, even the things that we think, oh, why did I do that? I'm all over the place. They all come together and they make total sense. And I think it was Steve Jobs who always said that you can't see your path looking straight ahead. The only way you can see it is looking back. So
That's right. You have to look back and do the assessment. You can't live there, but
no,
you have to do that assessment and then propel yourself forward
right.
and really lean into your gifts, which is what you're talking about. And I love this idea. I was visualizing when you were describing initially this experience of, okay, my thoughts are going here and there. And in a way, it's hyperactive in the sense that it's going so fast. It's going from thing to thing, and maybe there are more browser windows open
Mm-hmm.
on the computer than maybe on someone else's who doesn't have ADHD. They don't have as many browsers open.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it seems to me like you go deeper into these concepts because you don't have the same walls between you and the concepts, which is where that curiosity and that creativity seems to come into place. But we have to recognize the reality for the human brain. And this is so hard for people to hear. They don't like this neurology and psychology fact, but we're really not good multitaskers. We think we are, but we're really not. The brain doesn't work
Yeah.
that way. And the more tabs we have open, the harder it is to stay focused, right? Like we know that. That's a fact. And so, how have you in your life worked on trying to manage having all those browsers open, all of this unbridled creativity to maintain the focus to really get the things done that you want to do and lean into your passion?
Okay. A couple things. So I think we are really good, amazing, only when we are in our area of interest. And
Mm.
so I think what happens for a lot of ADHD women, especially, is we've been told as women that we're so good, much better at multitasking, right? And then there are all of the gender roles and the sexual stereotypes and the sexism around we take care of the home, we take care of the children, often we take care of the bills. And for our ADHD brains, again, that are brains of interest, if that's what we're interested in, great, we're going to be wonderful at it. But a lot of times, because it requires a lot of executive function, which is ultimately what we struggle with, the planning, the scheduling, time management, all of that kind of stuff, we're typically not great at that. And so what I have discovered is these amazing women, because I've never met a woman with ADHD who wasn't truly brilliant at something, even though she may not
Mm.
realize it just yet. when we are in that area of interest, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going?
No, I love it. Yeah. What we can't put our focus into something we're not interested into,
No,
right?
I know what it is. So then we beat ourselves up, and there's all this shame because we look at our friends. Oh my gosh, she can do all these things. She has dinner on the table. She can, do the shopping. The kids are doing their homework. She's turning in all the administrative paperwork. But for those of us who don't have the support at home, and we really suck at that, we can't even see our
Mm,
brilliance because it doesn't matter if we're in the C-suite, on the highest tree at the top of the mountain. If we can't do those basic things that society tells us as women we're supposed to do, then we are failures. And
mm,
I know people joke about, oh, it's just ADHD, but the one thing, and I'm very light about ADHD, I'm very hopeful about it. The one thing though that I want, your audience to hear though is how serious it is for women. So serious that there is a study out of Canada that shows that 24% of all women with ADHD have attempted suicide.
mm,
And that is 8 times higher than men without ADHD. Excuse me, 8 times higher than women without ADHD and 3 times higher than men with ADHD. So,
mm.
it
Wow.
really, and it's the shame.
Yes.
Once we know what it is and we understand how our brain works, then the sky's the limit because we're going to be in our area of interest and we're going to stop beating ourselves up about, that, our car's a mess or our house is a mess. And I say that wanting also the audience to understand that there are women with ADHD who are so perfectionistic, and I'm recovering, that their cars and their houses are perfect
Mm,
because they get so much anxiety if I call it visual pollution, right? We've already got so much going on in our brain. And so if
yes.
my, surroundings are also a mess, I I cannot get out of my way to get anything done. So when you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. And I know the party line is we're all a disaster,
Mm,
we all can't get out of our own way, we can't get anything done, and that is not true. I meet ADHD women all the time that are total powerhouses, but you get to a certain age and a level of, there's just so much to do and you just kind of hit the wall, where you're just kind of trying to keep all those balls up in the air, and then all of a sudden one ball falls and they all fall and you don't even recognize yourself anymore. And this is because
mm,
we now know, they didn't even know women could have ADHD. And a lot of doctors, you'll go try to get yourself diagnosed and they'll say, oh, you're a woman, you don't have ADHD. Or you
mm.
graduated from college, you don't have ADHD. But what they didn't know, but they know now, is estrogen modulates dopamine. And so ADHD is a spectrum. You can have very few of the symptoms. Maybe you have the best symptoms because drivenness can, that hyperactivity, fearlessness, that can really serve you, right? From a career
Mm.
standpoint. Or you can have so many symptoms that it's truly debilitating. And so, again, every single person who has ADHD, their symptoms are a little bit different, and how they manage it is a little bit different as well.
That is so important to note. And that's why I love, with your show, you have a lot of different people on the
Yeah.
show who have ADHD, different women, and they share their stories and they share their strengths. And you're very careful to, again, I think it's important how you talked about the dark with the light, because we
Mm.
can't lean into the light without understanding the darkness, right? We have to understand the dark parts of it so that that will propel us forward, because it would be so easy to live in shame, right? It would be so easy to say the way my brain works and the way my life looks doesn't fit whatever I'm seeing on the TV screen or reading in the magazine, what I'm hearing from my colleagues or my friends at dinner or at our parties, and to lean into shame. And because you're stuck in that shame spiral and it's reinforced by all of this kind of neurotypical ideals, which honestly, neurotypical people are also not meeting these ideals, and they're also feeling shame about them
Right.
too, because they're not reachable. And
It's
the
ridiculous.
plight of women in society and all of the hats we have to wear and the responsibilities, it's not sustainable.
Mm-mm.
But for anyone, no matter where they lie on this spectrum. But when we feel so hopeless, that's when it goes into the higher potential, as you said, for feelings of hopelessness and then even thoughts of suicide. And of course, we want to say, if you're having those thoughts of suicide, get help, get support. If you're actively thinking of taking your life, call 911, get yourself to safety, because this is a moment, this is a storm. All storms pass,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can get through this. But it's important to highlight how serious a problem it can be, because then we have no excuse anymore to live in shame. We have no excuse to buy into the narrative that we're doing something wrong. All that's doing is tethering us to the sadness, to the darkness, to the shame. And if we cut ties with that and we say, you know what? No, I have a purpose, I have a joy. And if I, like you said, lean into my interest, all of this energy can propel me forward and make the world better, instead of keeping me stuck where my energy is just me on this hamster wheel, just feeling like I don't fit in, I don't belong. What's my life? It's not meeting this metric that no one can really meet. So I love how you, through your show and your work, your book, you doing speaking engagements and coming on other shows like mine, to just showcase the fact that you do have this potential. You just need to direct it a different
Yeah.
place.
And especially for women with ADHD. So early on, I did a poll. We have a 100,000 member Facebook group. And I did a poll in the Facebook group. And I asked, do you feel like you have more of a need to live to your potential than your peers? Do you know 98% of the women that responded said yes.
Wow.
We are justice sensitive. Naturally, that's just part of our ADHD brains. We are mission driven. And so if we are not allowed to be, at least in the neighborhood of our purpose, allowed to be, let me rephrase that. If we are not, like nobody allows you, right? You allow yourself. If we are
Mm,
not in the neighborhood of our purpose, if we're not feeling like we're making a difference with our lives, we just can't we just can't be happy, I guess, is bottom line what it is. We
yes.
are not the kind of people that can, punch a clock, work 9 to 5, and then retire off into the sunset. We need to feel like we're making a difference. So I think for the women who may feel hopeless, that is usually what the problem is. And what I want to mention is the women that struggle the most with ADHD, it's not just ADHD, it's ADHD and trauma. And the reason
Hmm.
is because trauma symptoms mimic ADHD symptoms. The impulsivity, the distractibility, feeling like you're all over the place, nervous system dysregulation, all of it. And we also know that estrogen modulates dopamine. So there's certain times in a woman's life when, our hormones are going to bounce around, including estrogen, progesterone, all of it. And that is puberty, which is typically when you see ADHD symptoms start rearing their head for girls. For boys, it's, 7 to 9. So it's puberty, it's pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and menopause. And
Mm.
again, as we age, there's something that I call maturity onset ADHD. So if you would have asked me when I was 25 or 35 or even 40, do you have ADHD? And I knew what the symptoms were, I would have looked at it and said, I don't think so. But I did see the symptoms from the time that I was a little girl, right? I was super
Mm.
hyperactive. I was really chatty. I was driven even then. When I wanted to do something, I was going to figure out a way. I could be very impulsive in my speech and dress, friends down and, say things that there was a little girl, and this actually, we were in 8th grade, and we were all sitting in a circle, and everybody was saying, oh, what boy they liked. Like, what a stupid thing. But anyway, everybody was saying what boy they liked. And everybody kept saying the same guy. And then there was a friend of mine who said that same guy's name again. And I looked at her, this was awful. And I said to her, why do you like him? He doesn't like you. Well, that was true. But it's not something you say, right?
Yeah.
And I literally remember the audible gasp from the other girls in the circle, just as, that I would say that. And then they were like, you can't say that to people. And I'm like, why not? You guys were all thinking it. So it's things like that. But I can't remember what we were talking about. Word hole. Here we go.
Yeah, well, you make me think about so you brought me back to a time in my childhood where I believe it was 6th grade when I did my first I'd already been composing my own music, but I composed music for our school choir. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like I wrote it out and everything. I'd never done
Mm-hmm.
this before, but I walked up to my choir teacher and I told her, I want to do this. I think this needs to be done. The sense of justice. Like we need to have this really important piece of music, and I need to compose it to make it what it should be. And it was really interesting because out of that situation, it went really well. But I think when you are that kind of person and you have ADHD and you're maybe leaning into your purpose and you're really hyper focused, it's also important to understand that maybe not, because not everyone can relate to that. You may intimidate people, it may be off-putting, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your job to ameliorate their feelings about whatever they're doing in their life. And maybe on a different day, maybe one day they may be intimidated, maybe they go home, think about it, and they're inspired. So just do you.
Yeah, that too muchness. And I think certainly as girls and women, there's this sense that everybody's got to be the same, right? And I believe that the problem with most ADHD women is they're trying to fit in, and we will never fit in because ultimately we were meant to stand out. We were actually meant to lead in our area of interest. So if you are constantly too much, you can imagine, and this started from childhood on, you can imagine, and you're intuitive, right? You're highly intuitive. You can walk into a room and kind of read the energy. People don't even have to say anything, but you figure out that, okay, well, I am too much. And again, as women, we're not supposed to be too much, right? We're supposed to be shy and retiring and in our place. And we get that message not only from the patriarchal society, but also other women, right? It's uncomfortable and I understand why. If you're constantly having a friend who's never happy with the status quo and is always trying to make things better, we can be annoying, which is exactly why we need to lead, because people love to be led, but they don't always like to be told what to do, right? And that's what, because we see these things that other people don't see. I realized I went off on a tangent and I wanted to close my comment about trauma. So what I see happen a lot is you've got this unresolved trauma and people don't really understand what trauma is, right? It's, it does not have to be big T trauma where, you were assaulted or, sexually abused, or it can literally be you feeling unsafe, feeling too much with your ADHD year after year after year. And so now, you feel unsafe when you're in situations with other people because you never quite know when you're going to blurt something out that you probably shouldn't. And you never really know how people are going to react. And so what my point was that because estrogen modulates dopamine, once you get to that perimenopause, menopause stage, okay, your dopamine levels, because ADHD is ultimately, we don't make enough dopamine, norepinephrine. And so you get to the stage where you're already not making enough dopamine. And now your estrogen levels are plummeting. And so you're making even less dopamine. So your symptoms are going through the roof. And then if you also have trauma, which is causing ADHD-like symptoms, this is all piling on top of each other. And all of a sudden, everything falls apart.
Mm. Mm. So, do you have any tricks for people, sleep regimens, diets, mindset work that they can do? We can modulate dopamine through those things as
Mhm.
well. That
Totally.
doesn't necessarily address the potential processing issues. But, in many neurological disorders, the way we treat them is we basically give you more of the thing you're lacking in,
Yeah.
even if it's just a processing issue, because we're just trying to flood the receptors in the brain, right? We're like, okay, if we give you
Yeah.
enough, there's more to bind. So, what are the tricks that you've come up with for yourself or for your clients to try to override this system?
Yeah, and if you're like me, all of this medication, I am so sensitive, it
Mm,
literally just makes everything worse. Um,
mm,
Creates enormous anxiety. And so then they're giving you the stimulant medication, but you're also, they add the anxiety medication because in order to get the stimulant medication high enough, you're so anxious. For 20 to 30% of people, ADHD medication doesn't work. And I'm always being accused of being anti medication. I am not at all.
mm.
It can be life changing for the right brain.
Right,
Um,
right.
for mine, it didn't work. And so I had to develop other workarounds. And one of the things that I remembered was as a child, I danced ballet 6 days a week. And my brain was on fire. Granted, it was most of that time was pre puberty.
Mhm.
But even it was when I stopped ballet, which was after puberty, that's kind of when it all went to hell. So exercise is the number one hack for me. What we know through studies is 20 minutes of exercise that gets your heart rate up to 70% of max is as effective as a course of Adderall and Ritalin. No,
Mm.
Adderall and Prozac.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
you get the free therapy, you get the ADHD medication, and you don't get the side effects. You don't have those highs and lows. And even if medication does work for you, exercise makes it even more effective. So I literally start my day out I used to work out after. I've always, and I think it was from the ballet that I realized that I felt better when I was physically active, when I was moving.
Mm.
And so I've always been a gym rat. I'm not a runner. Like I've tried, but it's kind of like you need to chase me with a butcher knife. I'm just not built to run. It's the only time I'm going to run. But I've always worked out in a gym, and I used to do that after work. What I started to do is I did it first thing in the morning. So I got a Peloton, I got a treadmill. We have a little dinky, if you want to call it a gym upstairs. It's kind of not really. It's a little room with a bunch of exercise equipment in it. And at first it was hard, but you can neuroplasticity, you can
Mm.
retrain your brain. So now I feel like a little zombie. I wake up and first thing I just head right to, my Peloton or whatever,
Yeah.
and I do wait sometimes, after work. But at a gym, I use the exercise though, the first thing in the morning to jumpstart my brain and get it going. Like I will
Mm.
never show up I won't show up for anything, honestly. It's literally on weekends, I don't do it. On weekends, I go for walks, hikes, but during the week to jumpstart my brain so that I can actually function and do as well as I possibly can, I always work out. Sleep. So I was a sleep denier. Yeah. It was like a
Mm.
conspiracy theory, right? We have a lot of those lately. We didn't really need sleep. And it was when I heard, and my husband and I, it's the only thing we would argue about. Like and it's not like he wants to go to bed early. He wants to go to bed at a reasonable time, like 11. And I don't have problems with sleep in that once I get to bed, I can get to sleep. If I wake up, I can get back to sleep. I don't have any problems like that. Mine is the revenge bedtime procrastination. It's the time in my day. Nobody's going to bug me. I can do whatever the hell I want.
Mm.
And it usually gets out of hand. And so it started, especially after during the book, while I was writing the book, I was so busy that I could be up at till 2:33 in the morning. And a lot of it was, wrapping up like work things, but a lot of it was also garbage time. Like it didn't serve me
Mm.
at all. And
Mhm.
so what I read was that Your REM sleep, the quality and quantity of your REM sleep is directly proportional to your lifespan. And when I read that, that's when I started to do a lot of research. And I realized that sleep, especially for our ADHD brains, I mean, if you think of any mental health condition, it always gets worse when there's no sleep, right?
Exactly.
And so I started to test and I realized that, oh my gosh, I felt so much better when I got a reasonable amount of sleep. Now, I am not an 8 hours a night kind of person. I'm perfectly fine on 6 hours. I try to get seven, but I
Mm.
just don't need, I have so much energy, right? I'm not one of
Mhm.
these people who I can't get through the day because I'm exhausted and I'm tired. I don't take naps. It's just the way my brain works. But I knew that I needed more sleep. I
Mhm.
also think it's what we were talking about. It was about purpose, right? So if you are doing activities and moving your life forward around your intention, things that you want to do for you, a lot of times women with ADHD, especially women with trauma, they'll fall into this learned helplessness. Well,
Mm.
and do you blame them? I mean, they've tried to do things the way people tell them to do forever, and it doesn't work for their brain. And so they just assume, well, nothing's going to work. So why do I even bother? Just tell me what to do. Well, if you are doing what other people are constantly telling you you need to do, you are living their life and not yours. And I don't know a bigger prescription for unhappiness than that.
Mm.
And so for ADHD women, especially because we are interest driven, because we are mission driven, um, we have, and we have all these ideas and thoughts. And so we want to try everything. And so we can end up with this hodgepodge quilt of all these things we've tried and they don't really make sense to us because they are not in that sweet spot, right? Where our strengths, values, purpose, passion, all of it lives. And so for us, even more than a neurotypical, we need to know what that sweet spot is, where it is. And we need to be doing work in that sweet spot that has meaning to us. And then we're going to be so much better.
Mm. It's so true. And I love, and you provide ADHD specific coaching. Are you trying to help people find that sweet spot, or recognize the things that are missing, the pieces of the puzzle in their lives?
Yeah, I am not your tips and tricks ADHD coach. I don't do one-on-one coaching. I'll do an occasional consulting, but
Mhm.
what I have is a patented program called Your ADHD Brain is A-OK, and it is all about establishing those steps. And the thing about it
Mm.
is, I created this, so it works for anyone. I created this before ADHD. I got it patented as, a program that really had nothing to do with ADHD.
Mm.
But for us, again, it is so important to identify where we need to be working within, because who cares if you're on the highest tree if you're in the wrong forest?
Yeah,
And that's what happens with
100%.
most coaching, right? Okay, what do you want to work on? Well, how do you even know what you're supposed to be working on if you don't even know who you are?
Mm.
And everybody
Exactly.
thinks they know who they are. They think they know what they value. They think they know what their strengths are. But I have to tell you, and I've worked with thousands of women at this point. I've never worked with anyone who really, really knew, because we're not taught this in school. We don't spend the time doing it. And so the way I coach is we do groups, and it's all around answering those questions for yourself. So what I always say is, you're not going to fight me on this. You're going to actually have fun doing this, because I'm not putting you in a box like everybody else has been trying to. I am literally giving you the door and showing you how to pull the four corners of the box down and walk around and be exactly who you are. So the goal is always to be more of who you are, but you need to figure out who that is first.
Mm. I love that, and I love the focus on getting to the why,
Mhm.
which is such a testament to not only coaching, but it's so interesting. I have this benefit of, and I imagine you too, through the work you do, interviewing so many people who are doing very similar work, but with different language and different methodologies.
Mhm.
And it all comes down to, okay, the grand scheme is stop looking outward, turn your energy inwards, do some real deep digging, and then focus on that. And then when you're in your sphere of interest, then you can give your gifts to the world, and it won't feel depleting. It won't feel like you're just pouring yourself out and you're empty. It'll feel like you're expanding because you are really just increasing the energy because you're really in alignment with who you are. But we're all using, often with the different modalities, we're using different language to say the same thing, which is be who you are, lean into that, and don't forsake yourself for 1 minute.
Yeah. And for the ADHD brain, we need systems and structures. We need everything very clear and step by step. None of this, oh, well, here's some materials, go figure it out, which is what I struggled with. I felt like for decades, I was constantly looking for, okay, I just in my brain, I knew if I really knew what I valued and I really knew what my purpose was, everything would take off. And I think the beauty, and it was right. I think the beauty of knowing that sweet spot, that is exactly what happens because you start seeing when you're out in the world more things that reinforce what you've just learned about yourself. And so then it's not hard to be more of who you are. The fear kind of collapses and you can, especially for our ADHD brains, we need to do things in very small incremental steps on a regular basis. And that is what ultimately can be hard for us. We can do the hyperfocus and we can slam into something. But when there's fear, and if you are not impulsive, you're not the fearless kind of ADHD, it's almost like that frog that's put in boiling water. You kind of have to do that. And so all of a sudden you just start seeing why you need to do these things. And it gets to the point where you can't help but do them because it's who you are, right? You
Yeah,
understand.
that's beautifully said. What was the why behind you writing your book? What was the why behind ADHD for Smartass Women becoming a book?
So I wrote ADHD for Smartass Women for the 75% of women who have ADHD, don't know they have ADHD, have not been diagnosed, think that they're broken, so that they could understand their brains. And my whole goal was to provide hope because, again, I get all the studies, we need them. Unfortunately, they're usually not studies involving women because, that pesky thing called hormones. And so it takes 3.2 visits with clinicians for a woman to finally get the right diagnoses. Most of the time, women are diagnosed with anxiety or depression or depression. And the thing with ADHD is I've never met anyone with ADHD who doesn't also have a little bit of anxiety. I mean, how could you not, right? If you can't quite trust your brain. So again, I've never met an ADHD woman that wasn't truly brilliant at something. And I just wanted to be able to show them that they're no different. They just need to know what it is. And then once we know what it is, we can start building workarounds that work for us. So, tips and tricks, typical productivity tips and tricks, they don't work for us. Sometimes they do, but often they don't. And so the key with the ADHD brain is number one, we don't like to be told what to do because what you normally tell us what to do doesn't work. But second of all, we've got to test our own strategies, our own systems. And we typically have our own strategies and systems. We just don't know their strategies and systems because they're different than what everybody has been telling us we need to do. So it really is about looking at your life and seeing, okay, when I've had to do this similar thing, how did I get it done? What are the tips and tricks and tools that I used? Did I ask a friend to go to a coffee shop with me and she was working on her thing and I was working on my thing? Did I notice that, I don't know, after I run, I can literally sit down and, between, 10 and 12, just knock out the whole day's worth of work. And that might mean that I only work those 2 hours, but I am more productive than a neurotypical brain who works 8 hours. It's just really understanding that we're all different and we just need to hack our own brain and what works for us.
Absolutely. and celebrate those wins and take them
Yeah.
as data points. So instead, that helps you leave the old narrative behind, the one that didn't fit you, it
Yeah.
wasn't created for you,
Yeah.
and actually celebrate and create a data sheet in your mind. Like you said, one
Or on
from looking
paper.
backwards. Yeah, one on what looking backwards, this is what worked in the past.
Mhm.
I'm going to try to use that strategy, as you said, because I need a strategy. And in part, my brain feels disorganized because I've never done this. I've never created the mental scaffolding for myself,
Right.
right? Isn't
Right.
that what kids do when they go to college? They're learning mental scaffolding. Isn't that what we learn in school in general? We're not learning subjects, we're learning how to learn. But we don't, as you spoke to earlier, we don't necessarily learn the important mindset work. We don't learn how to disentangle from limiting beliefs and focus on what we can do and just stop worrying about what we can't do because that's a waste of our mental energy. Let's focus on creating a strategy for moving forward to reach our goals based on what our strengths are. And once we're focused on our strengths, we will find more because you see what you're seeking to see. You see those
My gosh.
patterns.
Absolutely. And what do they typically do when you're diagnosed with ADHD? They tell you all the things you can't do, all of your
Mm,
weaknesses, how you're broken, and the truth of the matter is, okay, are you hyperactive or are you just, otherworldly energetic? Are you
mm,
impulsive or are you fearless? Like there's always a strength. There's two sides of the coin. There's always a strength for every weakness. And I think we just need that reframe. Yeah.
exactly.
And the
Exactly. I love
celebration,
it.
because you're absolutely right. We typically don't celebrate. We tend to be what I call next people.
Mm.
And, that's because, we're dopamine seeking, right? Okay, we did this thing. Oh, is that all there is? Okay, next. What's the next thing that I'm going to do? And so we end up
Mm.
30 years later thinking, I haven't accomplished anything because we haven't celebrated all the things we've done. Like every time I have an ADHD woman on my podcast, it's laughable how much they've accomplished. And
Mm.
often, until you read that, their bio, they don't even realize it. They still think they haven't accomplished enough.
Hmm. I wonder what the statistics would be on them actually going to celebrations, like birthdays celebrated, graduations attended. I'd be curious to know what the statistics would be on that because I would venture a guess.
Mhm.
Because we don't, I think as women, we often don't take the time to celebrate ourselves. And then with ADHD, that nextness that I need to move on to the next thing, it's a interesting exercise to again set these data points, say no, I'm going to this my goal is not only to achieve writing my book, but I'm going to have a launch party and it's not going to be a
Didn't do
PR
that.
party. Oh, see, so next book I'm going to have a launch party and it's just for me. It's not for PR. It's just to celebrate me and my accomplishment. So then the next birthday, the next achievement, I'm like, oh, I did that last time and that was pretty great. And now I'm going to build these
Yes,
data points to show I deserve to be
yes.
celebrated.
Because I think a lot of it too comes from, okay, ADHD is as genetic as height, right? So you tend to come from families, like my
Mm,
family, tiger mom, tiger dad. My father is Japanese American, my mother's German. And, they're all about accomplishing, right? But we weren't a big celebration family. So when I think about when I graduated from college, I was on to law school. I didn't even think
yeah.
about going to the ceremony. I didn't go. I
Hmm.
went to my law school only because I think my mom is actually the one who said, no, we're going to do that. But then when I went to graduate law school, I didn't go to that. So,
Hmm.
we're not big birthday people. My parents, they're not the kind of people to throw parties for anniversaries so a lot of it, I think, too, is the family of origin and how you've been raised. You know,
Mm,
it was always like, of course you're going to do these things. But then there was no, oh my gosh, great job. Right. I mean, there
mm.
was, but not really. It was just,
Right. Not,
okay, what's the next pursuit?
yeah, not because everyone was coming from a similar,
Yeah. They weren't in awe of any
viewpoint.
of it.
Yeah.
Versus my
Well,
husband is Italian, and he was the first kid in his family to go to college, and so it
mm,
was a big hella deal, right? And they were always like that with him. It was always like, oh my gosh, what is the next thing you're going to achieve?
Mm.
So that's probably why I married him, because he's very different.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. So you saw that, and I love this idea too that we don't necessarily only have to go to the thing that feels exactly like home. We can go to the relationship that is complementing us and giving us something that wow, that looks nice. I'd love to experience that. That's beautiful.
Well, and then what I did with my own kids was insane, right? We go to the opposite. Like the birthday parties they had were insane. Um, because we weren't like, we didn't buy our kids material stuff. It was
Mm,
about experiences. So we would go, we would travel with them together. We still do. And it was like memories. And so the
mm,
birthday parties were something that, and the creativity, right? Like I loved it. I loved, putting that all together. And so, yeah, they were insane, which again,
mm.
ADHD, when you hyperfocus.
I love it though. And I love, you have spoken a lot about the difference, how some people will use this term superhuman, and that's not necessarily how you feel about ADHD, but that we can focus on our strengths.
So I don't believe that ADHD is a superpower, because if you told
Mhm.
me you can have all of your ADHD qualities, but I'm going to give you brilliant working memory, are you kidding me? I would take that in a heartbeat. Like I start a sentence, as I've shown you, and then all of a sudden I can't remember where the hell I'm going. I would love great working memory, but there are so many. I mean, part of the reason why I lose my train of thought is exactly because of my strengths. And so I
Mm.
think we have to start seeing that there's this yin and this yang. And I think what we also need to know is that 43% of all people with ADHD are in excellent mental health. Huge study, again, done out of Canada. I like those Canadians. But nobody ever talks about that. When I found that statistic, I almost fell over myself. I'm like, why have I not heard this? Why aren't
Mm.
all of the, really amazing resources, online and otherwise, why aren't we talking about this? Why are we hiding that ball? Because
Mm.
that really should be the standard. And we know that it can be if we are operating in our area of interest and we're in an environment where our environment, those people that make up our environment, love and appreciate us exactly the way we are. They're not trying to change us. And I get that there are times that we got to do some things we don't want to do. But if we are in positive emotion, if we are feeling good about ourselves and our self concept, we have a much easier time of getting those things done. We also probably have more income, right? So we can afford to help people do those things for us that we struggle to do. And I would hazard to guess that, for a man to hire people to help him, nobody ever second guesses that ever. Versus women,
Mm.
like just the abuse we take, we're just
Mm.
supposed to do it all. And if we don't, we're the ones that are defective and something's wrong with us. And it's just all crap.
It is. There's nothing wrong with you. You are who you are. Let's lean into that and see where we can go if we are putting our energy there. And I am just so grateful for you, Tracy, for creating so many beautiful spaces. And I think that is a gift of someone who has the energy that you have and the excitement and the creativity. You're not just like, I'll write a book and I'm sure anyone who wants to read it will read it and that's enough. No, you are creating your own podcast. You are coaching and creating online tools. Can reach out to you on social media. And then you are so generous with your time to come and talk on podcasts like mine to share your message even further. And that just shows your commitment to creating those safe spaces where women with ADHD can let go of any past feelings of not enoughness
Yeah.
or too muchness
Yeah.
and say, no, I'm exactly who I need to be. And now I found the place where I belong. And that can lead me to my most promising future.
Absolutely. And if I could put in a little brag here, our book was just selected by Amazon editors as one of the top 20 best nonfiction books of 2024. So I'm like, what? I don't know how that
Oh,
happens, but it's, we just start moving forward and things happen for us
well,
when
we
we're in
know
our
how
area
it
of
happened.
interest.
Yeah, we know how it happens. We lean into our area of
Yeah.
interest. We stop telling ourselves lies about what we can and can't do. And we just go and we just run with all that amazing radiant energy that you have. So, thank you so much for sharing it. Tell us how listeners can learn more about you, where they can go, your website.
So probably the easiest place to find me is at ADHDforsmartwomen.com.
Excellent. And where can they purchase your book?
Everywhere. Local bookstore, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere where books are sold.
I love it. Well, it's so exciting. And you can get it on Kindle, which is how I've
Yeah.
accessed it to date. But I really want to have a nice copy so I can put it behind me, just like you've got a nice copy or several copies behind you, because it's such a wonderful resource. And I want people to know that it's there who haven't already. Obviously, a lot of people know about it because it is on this list with Amazon. Congratulations for that very well earned achievement. And I'm just so excited to continue to listen along on your show and learn, and I'm sure that our listeners will be able to do that now too. So everybody go and subscribe to ADHD for Smartass Women so that you can learn more from Tracy Otsuka. It has been so wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And everyone, please leave comments. And you can also reach me at www.drshaferstedranova.com. If you want to be on the show or have questions for us, I would love to have your input. Thank you so much for being here. Stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon. Excellent. I will stop it.